So, whenever a passage is slightly on the longer side, I always recommend taking written notes, right? And few things that I can tell you about these written notes is that you never note down the detail. You basically take notes whenever there is a shift in the tone, whenever there's dates, whenever there's some conclusion, or whenever you feel like um, a particular line or few particular lines are related to the purpose of what the passage is trying to do as a whole, right? I never note down the nitty-gritties of any passage because that consumes a lot of time. And the whole point of taking these notes is to help your brain better understand and engage with the passage. You should never ever answer using your notes. That's a mistake that sometimes students make. The whole point of these notes is to basically help you develop a skeleton or a map of the passage, right? So later on, when you read through the questions and you're trying to answer them, you can use the map to go to the exact lines which are required to answer your question. And at the same time, the map also helps you in making a good overall sense of the passage. So let's read the passage. All right, so according to a recent theory, Archean age gold quartz vein systems were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluids that originated from molten granite-like bodies deep within the surface of the earth. So I'd probably just write there is some recent theory deep within the earth, any keywords that would help me read or understand or engage with the text, or probably even recall. All right, so some gold systems. All right. Now, this theory is contrary to the widely held view that the systems were deposited from metamorphic fluids, that is, from fluids that formed during the dehydration of wet sedimentary rocks. So this recent theory basically undermines or contradicts or contrasts the common view or the widely held view. Okay, fair enough. The recent developed theory has considerable practical importance. Notice the tone, right? It does set up a tone for what the purpose of the passage is going to be, because it seems like the passage wants to now start talking about how important this recent theory is. Okay, so most of the gold deposits discovered during the original gold rushes were exposed at the Earth's surface and were found because they had shed trails of alluvial gold. Alluvial is a word defined, it used to define something which is a leftover, like leftover sediments after, for example, water has flown through an area, right? So it can shed alluvial trails or alluvial sediments. Anyway, so they had shed trails of alluvial gold that were easily traced by simpler prospecting methods. Although these same methods still lead to an occasional discovery, most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression. Now, I do not know how exactly the recent developed theory has is linked to all of this, but yeah, my job is to just understand what the macros of the passage are. So this is somehow important practically, right? And probably it can help us discover new deposits, because initially they were easy to explore or discover, but now it says that most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression. All right, this is all I understood from this, honestly speaking. Let's move on. The challenge in exploration is therefore to unravel the subsurface geology of an area and pinpoint the position of buried minerals. Okay, the subsurface, like inside the surface geology. Methods widely used today include analysis of aerial images that yield, a broad geological overview. Geophysical techniques. Okay, now we are going into like a lot of details. Those methods include geophysical techniques that provide data on magnetic, electrical, and mineralogical properties of the rocks being investigated, and sensitive chemical tests that are able to detect the subtle chemical halos that often envelop mineralization. I mean, that's way too field specific, way too vexing if you are of the opinion that you're supposed to understand everything in a GRE passage. Um, what I understood from this paragraph was that, the challenge is to understand, like, if this is the surface, the challenge is to understand what's here, what's below the surface. And then they have mentioned some methods in the third paragraph. All right. However, now words like however, but, etc., etc., show a shift in the tone, so I get very alert about what's coming next. So, however, none of these high technology methods are of any value if the sites to which they applied have never mineralized. And to maximize the chances of discovery, the explorer must therefore pay particular attention to selecting the ground formations most likely to be mineralized. All right, so these same methods, probably aren't very helpful, right? And the challenge is aren't very helpful if the site has not mineralized, whatever that means. And so the challenge now is to pay particular attention to selecting the ground formation most likely to be mineralized. All right, so pick mineralized grounds. Okay, anyway, moving on. Now, such ground selection relies to varying degrees on conceptual models which take into account theoretical studies of relevant factors. And these models are constructed primarily from empirical observations of known mineral deposits and from theories of ore forming processes. So, okay, so to do these, you need models, um, whatever that means. I don't know, maybe a computer model or something like that. And these models depend on theories and empirical observations. Okay. The explorer uses the models to identify those geological features that are critical to the formation of the mineralization being modeled. Okay, so I think, uh, if you go back a little and you read this, if you think about this paragraph, the paragraph talks about different methods that are used today. to pinpoint the position of buried minerals, then it says in the next paragraph that they are not useful if the site has never mineralized. And so you should then be able to identify, or any explorer then should be able to identify the ground formations which are most likely to be mineralized, right? And such ground selections can be done through using some conceptual models, which depends on theories and empirical observations. So all of this is happening because we are trying, or any explorer is being suggested to use models to pick ground formations most likely to be mineralized. Moving on. And then tries to select areas for exploration that exhibit as many of the critical features as possible. All right, so basically use these models and then pick grounds most probably mineralized, or pick grounds which exhibit as many critical features as possible. Probably those critical features refer to features of a ground which is most likely to be mineralized. All right. Okay, fair enough. So let's move on to the question that you were shown. So what is the author primarily concerned with? From a bird's eye view, from a cursory understanding of the overall passage, I can tell you that it starts by mentioning some new theory which contradicts some existing one, and then tells you how that is important and can probably help in new explorations. And then it tells you what the challenge is, right? And how the challenge is currently being met. And then it moves on to telling you that the way in which it is currently being met is not really optimal. And so you should be doing this using some conceptual models and then picking grounds based upon those models for further exploration. So is that advocating a return to an older methodology? I don't think so. There's no mention of an older methodology. In fact, if you, okay, like we can say that in these lines, the passage says that most of the gold deposits discovered during the original gold rushes were exposed at the Earth's surface and were found because they had shed trails of alluvial gold that were easily traced by simple prospecting methods. Although these same methods still lead to an occasional discovery, notice the language, an occasional discovery, most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression, right? So, I mean, even if that simple prospecting method was an older methodology, the passage is not advocating a return to it. In fact, it's saying that, these methods now seldom work, right? Pointing towards that we probably need new methods. It's very safe to say that option A is wrong because, yeah, the passage is not advocating a return to an older methodology, and the highlighted lines are a proof of that. All right. Option B, is the author primarily concerned with explaining the importance of a recent theory? I mean, yeah, it kind of starts by setting the tone for purpose of the passage in the second paragraph by saying that, the recently developed theory has considerable practical importance, and then, builds upon that by saying that simple prospecting methods are no longer useful, there's a challenge, and then you have some methods that are being used to overcome those challenges, but they are not, these high technology methods are not of any value if this happens. So yeah, it does feel like it's very hard for me to answer here how this whole text is linked to the importance of a recent theory, but I know that these GRE passages are not random dialogues between people, right? So they're very structured. So this line is not random. The passage does want to talk about the importance of this recently developed theory, and how the rest of it is linked to it. I'd probably understand that by reading it one or two more times. But from what I have understood is that, it says that there are some challenges, some methods being used to overcome those challenges, but those methods are useless if the sites have not been mineralized, and so you should be using models to pick sites which are most likely to be mineralized. And then when it says that these models are constructed primarily from empirical observations of known mineral deposits and from theories of ore forming processes, and which, by the way, the first paragraph mentions a theory of ore forming process, right? Then calls it important because it has considerable practical importance. So probably the whole point of the passage is to tell you that, um, these models should be used, and they are depending on empirical observations of known mineral deposits and on theories of ore forming processes, one of which the author, or you can say the passage, has lionized. So yeah, this is a very good option. So let's read option C. Is the passage concerned with enumerating differences between two widely used methods? I mean, this is one of those absurd options which I can, because there's no mention of two widely used methods anywhere, right? And even if you say, okay, fine, these methods widely used today have been mentioned, and then it says that these are not useful. But then, even then, there's no enumeration of the differences between what the widely used methods are, and then there's another widely used methods, and these are the two differences. These are the multiple differences between these two widely used methods. There's just one mention of one type of, like, okay, fine, if we say um, methods widely used today include this, 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 and this. Where's the enumeration of differences between these? Nowhere. It's wrong. Okay, so option C is wrong. Let's read option D. Is the author primarily concerned with describing events leading to a discovery? That's like saying the whole passage is structured in a way that it tells you that this is what is going to happen before a discovery. This is the step one, and then that happens, and then that happens. I mean, the passage, I think not even a single event leading to a discovery has been described. I think there's a suggestion. There's a suggestion that you should be doing something if you want to pick the right grounds for further exploration. But there's no mention of anything like, once you get closer to discovery, or once you start your discovery, this is the first step that you should be taking, and this is what happens afterwards, and that is what happens afterwards. So yeah, this option is incorrect. All right, is the author primarily concerned with challenging the assumptions on which a theory is based? I mean, yeah, I mean, a recent theory has been mentioned, right? And it has been mentioned that it contrasts a widely held view, but then the rest of the passage is not talking about challenging the assumptions on which any of these theories are based. So I would say option B is your best option, right? Because in the first line of the second paragraph, it sets the tone up, and then, like I explained, the rest of the passage is linked with that, because it culminates in saying that you should be using models, and these models are basically made from empirical observations, and from theories of ore forming processes. Someone watching this might be thinking, would I have this much time to think about all of these things during the actual exam? Well, the main purpose of this practice is to help you develop the right habits, the right neural patterns, the right patterns of thinking, to help you identify pivotal words, key strategies, which you can deploy to basically help your brain in making better abstract connections and analyzing the data better and understanding it better, right? At sometimes the macro level, sometimes if the question requires or the option requires at a micro level. So as you carry on using what you're learning here and strictly stick to the instructions that I'm giving you, like for instance, for this type of a question, I recommend that you understand the passage from a bird's eye view, just the overall position or the overall purpose of each paragraph. You would be able to answer such questions really well, right? And yeah, but when you read through the options, it always helps to go to some specific line and say, okay, see, this, like for example, advocating a return to an older methodology was ruled out because when I read these lines, I saw the passage suggesting that older methodologies are no longer going to work. They're probably obsolete. So I crossed it. And then for every option, I had to either go through some specific lines or look at the passage from, from macro view. And of course, as you practice more and keep following the guidelines, keep watching these simulations of me solving these passages, you would both develop some hardline rules about on how to approach GRE passages and a very strong intuition of what to do and how to improvise and navigate through different type of passages and questions. So, according to the passage, the widely held view of Archean age gold quartz vein systems is that. Now, again, this is a question where I'll have to read each option and see if that is a widely held view of about these quartz vein systems, right? But just so it happens, I remembered there was some mention of yeah, in the first paragraph it says this theory. What theory? This theory is contrary to the widely held view that the systems, which systems, the Archean age gold quartz vein systems, were deposited from metamorphic fluids, right? So the widely held view is that, and if you read from the initial lines, it starts by talking about the Archean age gold quartz vein systems, right? So according to a recent theory, it says the systems were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluids that originated from molten granite-like bodies deep within the surface of the earth, right? So that's the recent theory. And this theory is contrary to the widely held view that the systems were deposited from metamorphic fluids, right? So the widely held view is that they were deposited from the metamorphic fluids. So yes, the very first option, that's correct. The passage implies that which of the following steps would be the first performed by explorers who wish to maximize their chances of discovering gold. Again, a type of question where I can um you know look at the keywords like the first performed steps, first performed, maximize chances of discovery or discovering gold. So from the skeleton that I made, I can tell that this was talked about in the last paragraph. All right, so there you go. So, um, it first tells you how the methods mentioned in the last paragraph are not very helpful, and then it says that um, to maximize the chances of discovery, the explorer must therefore pay particular attention to selecting the ground formations most likely to be mineralized, right? So use some model, because that is what it says in the next line. Such ground selection relies to varying degrees on conceptual models, which take into account theoretical studies or relevant factors. So yeah, the passage implies that the first step should be to pay attention to the ground formations, which are most likely to be mineralized. And these ground selection, the selection of these grounds depends on some conceptual models. So yeah, you should do this first. Use the models and use the right grounds. You pick the right grounds. All right, so does A say that serving, does a passage say that, yeah, you should be serving several sites known to have been formed more than 2 billion years ago? Nope, the passage does not say that. Does the passage say that you should be limiting exploration to sites known to have been formed from metamorphic fluid? No, it says that you should be picking grounds using these conceptual models, which are most likely to be mineralized. Does the passage say that you should be using an appropriate conceptual model to select a site for further exploration? Yes, this is probably correct. Um, does the passage say that you should be using geophysical methods to analyze rocks over a broad area? No, it says that you should be paying attention to selecting the ground formations most likely to be mineralized, and that they depend on some conceptual models, right? So no. Does the passage say that you should be limiting exploration to sites where alluvial gold has previously been found? I mean, this alluvial thing has come up so many times that I now remember that um, deposits that were found because they had shed trails of alluvial gold were easy to find, easy to discover, but those easy discoveries do not happen anymore because most deposits are now buried. So yeah, this is like exactly the opposite of what the passage is suggesting. So yeah, option C is a very straightforward option, matches the information that we pinpointed, and hence is the correct option. Chiji, which of the following statements about discoveries of the gold deposits is supported by information in the passage? For a question like this, I'll have to read each option to decide which one's correct. And all right, let's read this one and find where anything related to this has been said in the passage and see if it's correct or not. So, does the passage support that the number of gold discoveries made annually has increased between the time of original gold rushes and the present? I mean, the passage makes no mention of the number of discoveries anywhere. Does the passage support that new discoveries of gold deposits are likely to be the result of exploration technique designed to locate buried mineralization? There was a mention of buried, yeah. Does the Although these same methods still lead to an occasional discovery, most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected. Not yet discovered, those which have not been yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression. And the challenge in exploration is therefore to unravel the subsurface geology. So, yeah, it does suggest that new discoveries of gold deposits are likely to be the result of exploration techniques designed to locate buried mineralization. Okay, so option C, does the passage support that it is unlikely that newly discovered gold deposits will ever yield as much as did those deposits discovered during the original gold rushes? Uh-huh. The original gold rushes, most of the gold deposits discovered during the original gold rushes were exposed at the Earth's surface and were found because they had shed trails of alluvial gold that were easy. I mean, it does say that during the original gold rushes, the deposits were easy to find, but it does not say that those deposits made more or less. They gave out more or less gold than the discoveries that are made now. So, or that it is unlikely that the new discoveries of gold deposits will yield less gold than the discoveries that were made during the old gold rushes. So there's no information like that about the amount of gold that there could be in the old versus the new discoveries. Anyway, so option D. Does the passage support that modern explorers are divided on the question of the utility of simple prospecting methods as a source of new discoveries of gold deposits? The mention of simple prospecting methods was, yeah, that's where it's done. So if I start reading from maybe the first line, the recently developed theory has considerable practical importance. Most of the gold deposits discovered during the original gold rushes were exposed at the Earth's surface and were found because they had shed trails of alluvial gold that were easily traced by simple prospecting methods, right? And although the same methods still lead to an occasional discovery, more often than not, that doesn't happen, right? That's what the author is saying roughly in this paragraph. So that's not the same as saying that there's some sort of a debate about what these prospecting methods um, to what extent these simple prospective methods are useful or not, right? So there's no division on the question of the utility of simple prospecting methods as a source of new discoveries. There's just a mention that, simple prospecting methods were helpful back in the history because you could trace trails of alluvial gold and reach gold deposits, right? So yeah, this is not supported by the passage. Option E says that models based on the theory that gold originated from magmatic fluids have already led to new discoveries of gold deposits. Uh-huh. Well, there is a mention of models. The author says that such ground selection relies to varying degrees on conceptual models, but there's no mention of models which have already led to new discoveries of gold deposits anywhere. Let me just make sure of that by reading the last few lines. So the explorer uses the models to identify those geologic. Yeah, all right, so this is wrong. The only option that is supported by the passage is B, that new discoveries of gold deposits are likely to be the result of exploration techniques designed to locate buried mineralization, right? And those right there are the lines where this information is supported. It can be inferred from the passage that which of the following is easiest to detect. I'll have to read each option to see if there's any information in the passage related to the option where the passage is labeling it or calling it the easiest to detect. All right. So does the passage anywhere imply that a gold quartz vein system originating in magmatic fluids is the easiest to detect? There is a mention of that in the beginning. Yeah, okay, so the recent theory is that these systems were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluids that originated from molten granite-like bodies deep within the surface of the earth. And this is contrary to the widely held view. But then there's no mention that, that these are the easiest to detect. All right, so I'm going to park and read B. B says a gold quartz vein systems originated in metamorphic fluids is the easiest to detect. Does the passage say that anywhere? Yeah, I mean, there's a mention of metamorphic fluids just as a widely held view, which is contrary to a recent theory, which, by the way, the passage says has considerable practical importance. But then there's no. I'm going to park B because there's no information in the passage that I can think of from the question that I've solved so far and the passage lines that I've read in some cases multiple times, that this type of uh, gold quartz vein system is the easiest to detect. All right, So does the passage say anywhere that a gold deposit that is mixed with granite? There's no mention of granite. Okay, so this is probably the first option that I know for sure is wrong. Am I being too confident? Let me check. Let me just quickly see if there is a mention of granite anywhere. No, no. All right. Option D. Does the passage say that a gold deposit that has shed alluvial gold is the easiest to detect? Can you infer this? Shed. Yeah, most of the gold deposits discovered during the original gold rushes were exposed at the Earth's surface and were found because they had shed trails of uh, alluvial gold. See these these few words that were easily traced by simple prospecting methods. So yeah, probably this is the we can infer that this type of a deposit which has shed alluvial gold is the easiest to detect because you can just look at the alluvial traces and trace them to the deposit. All right, so if I compare C with A and B, it definitely C is better. But let's read D. Um, a gold deposit that exhibits chemical halos. There was a mention of chemical halos. All right, so that right there is a mention of chemical halos, but let's read what the whole line was saying. So method widely used today include analysis of aerial images that yield a broad geological overview, geophysical techniques that provide data on magnetic, electrical, and mineralogical properties of the rocks being investigated, and sensitive. Yeah, I mean, it says that, methods widely used today include this, and that. And, they are to detect the subtle chemical halos that often envelop mineralization. But it doesn't say that a gold deposit which exhibits those chemical halos is the easiest to detect, right? Option D is a very straightforward option because we have a very straightforward proof for it in the passage. So option D is your correct option. So the theory mentioned in lines 1 to 3 relates to the conceptual models discussed in the passage. In which of the following ways? What's the theory mentioned in the first 3 lines? There you go. According to a recent theory, um, these systems were formed more than 2 billion years ago from magmatic fluids that originated from molten granite-like bodies deep within the surface of the Earth. That's the theory. Now, how does it relate to the conceptual models and which are mentioned in the last paragraph? Um, to maximize the chances of discovery, the explorer must therefore pay particular attention to selecting the ground formations most likely to be mineralized. And such ground selection relies to varying degrees on conceptual models, which take into account theoretical studies of relevant factors. And these models are constructed primarily from empirical observations of known mineral deposits and, read this, and from theories of what? Theories of ore forming processes. And the explorer uses the models to do blah, 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 blah. Anyway, um, so you have a theory which the passage says has considerable practical importance, and then the passage suggests that you should be using models, and then it says that these models are primarily made from empirical observations of known mineral deposits and from theories of ore forming processes, one of which has been highlighted in the passage as one having considerable practical importance. Okay, gives me a rough answer, but let's read through the options. So option A, what's it? Okay, the theory. The theory may furnish a valid account of ore forming processes and hence can support conceptual models that have great practical significance. I don't know if it's one of those questions where every option seems correct, but option A does seem correct. I'm going to put it in a maybe because that's what I extracted from reading it. There's a theory mentioned in line 1 to 3. The passage says it has great practical importance, then it builds upon that and culminates in saying that you should be using some models to maximize the chances of discovery, and those models depend on um, empirical observations of known mineral deposits and from theories of ore forming processes. So yeah, because of that, option A does seem correct, that theory in line 1 to 3 may furnish a valid account of ore forming processes and can help support conceptual models which are quite practically significant. Option B. Does the theory suggest that certain geological formations, long believed to be mineralized, are in fact mineralized, thus confirming? Okay, the current conceptual models is where I have a clear problem with this option. There's no mention of any um, current conceptual models. Let me read through the last paragraph quickly again. Using selecting blah blah blah, such ground selection relies to various degrees on conceptual models, and these, yeah, like there's no mention of the any current conceptual models being confirmed by anything. Yeah, so this goes out. Option C. It suggests the theory suggests that there may not be enough similarity across Archean age gold quartz vein systems to warrant the formulation of conceptual models. No, the author is actually suggesting the formation of conceptual models and the use of conceptual models for further exploration. Um, I mean, there's no mention that there may not be enough similarity across these systems to warrant the formation of conceptual models anywhere. There's a mention that these models should be used because they will maximize the chances of discovery. But yeah, if I compare this with option A stands a better chance. So yeah, this goes out. Option D, the theory corrects existing theories about the chemical halos. I mean, the theory does um, say something different to the widely held view, but is that the same as saying that it corrects that theory about chemical halos? There's no mention that that theory has anything to say about chemical halos anywhere. So, nope. Option E. It suggests that simple prospecting methods still have a higher success rate in this. Well, the simple prospecting method was used in the original gold rushes, and that still leads to an occasional discovery, but most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they're buried and have no surface expression. So there's no suggestion that simple prospective methods have a higher success rate, right? Let alone this theory somehow. Um, yeah, okay. Let's read the question again. Like, where's the link between the theory and the conceptual models in option E. Option E does not even talk about those conceptual models. So yeah, it's irrelevant. This is what GRE questions do sometimes. They just engage you in thinking about what the option is saying. Sometimes you forget, lose track of what the question was actually talking about. The question was asking you how the theory mentioned in the first three lines relates to conceptual models. E is not even talking about that. So option A is the best option, right? Because if you go back to reading the first three lines, the theory is mentioned, then it says that it has considerable practical importance, builds upon that, and then recommends usage of conceptual models and says that these models are made from empirical observations of known mineral deposits and from theories of ore forming processes, one of which he or she, the author, has said has considerable practical importance, right? And that's the theory in the first three lines. So yeah, that theory may furnish a valid account of ore forming processes and hence can support conceptual models that have great practical significance. Option A is the correct option. Alright, so according to the passage, methods of exploring for gold that are widely used today are based on which of the following facts? I always say that if you can go back to the passage first and form your own answer, do that. And in this situation, I would just think, can I go back to the passage and find an answer from within the passage? All right. So, according to the passage, methods of exploring for gold, which are widely used today, are based on which of the following facts? Okay. Um, well, what are the methods widely used today? Alright, so there's a mention of the methods widely used today. Okay, and before that, probably I would be able to find why they are used today. So the challenge is in exploration is therefore to unravel the subsurface geology of an area and pinpoint the position of buried minerals, right? So you have to basically do something with unraveling the subsurface geology, like the beneath the surface geology of an area, and pinpoint the position of buried minerals, right? And methods widely used today include possible solutions for that, right? And if you go slightly up, it says, although these same methods still lead to an occasional discovery, most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression. So it starts by saying that, and then it moves on to telling you what the challenge is and what the methods are. So yeah, I think the answer is that methods are based upon the fact that you have to know the subsurface geology, and pinpoint the position of buried minerals. Anyway, so are the methods based upon the fact that most of the Earth's remaining gold deposits are still molten? There's no such mention of that, so it's wrong. Are the methods of exploring for gold that are widely used today based on the fact that most of Earth's remaining gold deposits are exposed at the surface? On the contrary, they're based on the fact that they're not exposed at the surface, right? It's the exact opposite of what the passage is saying, so this option is incorrect. Option C is saying most of the Earth's remaining gold deposits are buried. and have no surface expression. So methods of exploring for gold that are widely used today are based on the fact that most of Earth's remaining gold deposits are buried and have no surface expression. Yeah, that sounds true because if you go back to the line, it says that although these same methods, talking about the simple prospecting methods in the line before, right? Those simple prospecting methods still lead to an occasional discovery. Most deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried. Oh yeah, okay. So yeah, it even says this part. So I am almost like a 99.9% sure this is correct, but just for the sake of it, let's read D and E. So D says only one type of, okay, so methods of exploring for gold today are widely used, that are widely used today are based on the fact that only one type of gold deposit warrants exploration, and since other types of gold deposits are found in regions difficult to reach, well, there's no mention that there's just one type of gold deposit that you should be exploring. I mean, it does say that it does talk about the Archean age gold quartz vein systems, but it does not make any mention of any other system or say that this particular system, that is to assume if this is not the only one, which I mean, we should not be assuming anything. But let's say even if we assume that this is not the only one and there are other gold quartz vein systems or systems where you can through which gold was formed in some way, there's no mention of any other system, and there's no comparison or lionization of one type of gold deposit over the other. So yeah, that's incorrect. Option E. Let's complete. Like I have a habit of completing um, the whole thing by starting from the question and then joining and making a sentence that makes full sense. So our methods of exploring for gold that are widely used today, based on the fact that only one type of gold deposit warrants. I mean, I've already refuted this first half, this first, you could say, part of the option, which is same for both option D and E. So it's incorrect, but yeah, let's just read further. Since the other types of gold deposits are unlikely to yield concentrated quantities of gold, again, there's no mention of other type of gold deposits at all. Option C is mentioned, and yes, methods of exploration for gold that are widely used today are based on the fact that most gold deposits not yet discovered have gone undetected because they are buried and have no surface expression.